AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. As often happens with the show, I have the good fortune that so many of my guests have good experience that they refer other guests to me, and that's what happened today. My guest is Dr. Marsha Seidelman, and she's going to be talking about feeding our microbiome. And please welcome her to the show. It's very nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Chef AJ. Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited because I'm kind of a science nerd. And so when doctors or when anybody says, hey, do you mind if I share some slides? I'm like, no, that's like my favorite thing. But before you do, I'd like to get to know you a little bit and how you got involved with this topic and healthy eating and things like that in general.
Yeah. So I've been in medicine for a while. I graduated in '83 from Einstein in New York. And I do primary care medicine, and many of the people I treat have illnesses that are a consequence of the foods that they've been eating. And so I got much more into lifestyle medicine over the last few decades, more interested in what my patients are eating and what they're doing. And by going to conferences, each time I'd go to a food conference, I'd get a little bit more plant-based. And I realized over the years that it's really very important for the health and for what we call the health span, not just living longer, but living better with less disability. So that's how I got involved, and I'm getting more and more into it. And I love learning about the microbiome. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
And do you currently have a practice that's open? Do you do virtual? Tell me about your practice.
Yeah, we went virtual just for about 3 months last year, but it's all in person now. It's internal medicine and lifestyle. I've been a pulmonary specialist for most of these years, but the last year or two, I've cut back on that and just doing general internal medicine. And I never thought I could be a lung doctor virtually, but last year we managed it for a few months, but I'm glad to be seeing patients in person. It's much better now.
Right. And where do you practice? And could somebody ostensibly, if they're watching from your area, go to see you?
Yeah, so I'm in practice in Kensington, Maryland, just outside of DC. And I'm actually not taking new patients now because I like to spend a lot of time with my patients. And so the practice is currently closed, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Nice. Well, are there other ways for people to connect with you? Do you have a social media presence or a blog or things like that?
Yes, absolutely. Lady Doc's Corner Cafe is a website that we started about 8 years ago, and it's got recipes and health pearls, and we talk all about the latest health issues, basically to counteract the misinformation that's on a lot of social media and popular media. So join us at ladydocscornercafe.com. It's free, and we'd love to have more readers.
I love that, Lady Docs. You mentioned you've gone to conferences. Since you live so close, I think, to DC. Have you ever gone to like the PCRM conference, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just at it last year. It's a great conference based at George Washington University with Neil Barnard. Yeah, great conference.
Very good. Well, why are you so interested in the microbiome?
Well, it turns out that we think we're in charge of our bodies, and it turns out that really the bacteria that are living inside of us are in charge, and we could affect which bacteria are there. So it's a field that's really new, lots of new information, and it's exciting that it's changing every day.
Great. Well, I'd love to see what you've prepared for us.
Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see it now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the reason I'd like to talk about the human microbiome is that we, for years, have known that red meat is not so good for you and fruits and vegetables are great for you, but we never really understood why. And so in a very non-scientific way, we could imagine that if you eat something like meat, that you could get fat and cholesterol collecting in your coronaries, and you can end up with heart attacks and strokes. But that's not really how it happens at all. You digest that. And why is it that when you digest red meat, it's so much different than when you digest fruits and vegetables? And what kind of health effects does that have? So that's what we're going to be talking about, is how the meat actually leads to disease. Okay. So what is the human microbiome anyway? We hear a lot about it these days, and it's all the bacteria, viruses, and fungi that are on all our body surfaces. They're on your kitchen countertops. They're everywhere. And the most bacteria are actually in the end of the colon, the end of the small intestine, and all through the large intestine. And they live in symbiosis with us, so that we feed them whatever goes through our gut, and they process it and they make chemicals for us. And we'll be talking about all of those. And they basically protect us from other bugs. So they're the good bugs. And when things like Shigella and Salmonella and that kind of thing come through, they compete with them and mostly don't let them take hold. And not only do they keep other bacteria out, but our good bacteria are responsible for all kinds of chemicals in our body, the vitamins we make, the hormones, good things like serotonin and dopamine, and our antibodies to fight infection, and how we process sugar, and whether or not we're full, and how we process the calories that we take in. So they really are responsible for many, many processes in our bodies. And there's a different microbiome on all the different parts of your body. So your mouth has one kind, your stomach and the rest of your colon has a different kind. And as a lung specialist, what I was really surprised to learn is that there are bacteria in the lungs. We have, for the last 4 decades that I've been practicing medicine, learned that there are no bacteria in the lungs. They're supposed to be sterile. And when there's bacteria there, it's actually a pneumonia. But it turns out that there are bacteria all through the lungs, and they tend to keep out the bad bacteria there as well. And the skin has its own set of microbes, so that when you cut yourself, the good bugs actually help you heal. So they're very important to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the intestines now. So when you eat simple sugars like plain sugar, white bread, that kind of thing, we can digest that in our stomachs. And the fiber, however, we don't have the right enzymes for. So the fiber goes through the small intestine and through the large intestine, which is this green organ here, and ends in the rectum. So if we cut across the intestine, what we're looking at is the inside here, the lumen, and that's where all those bugs, the good bugs and the bad bugs, they all live here. And when you have a healthy colon, you have a nice thick mucus layer, and that mucus layer keeps toxins from going through the wall and into the blood vessels. If they went through the wall into the blood vessels, then you could have a big inflammatory reaction, cause autoimmune disease, cause all kinds of inflammation in your body. So we're going to talk about the difference, what happens when you eat more fiber versus when you eat Big Macs. And here we go. So what kind of bugs do you have in your microbiome? So if this is a desert, like where Chef AJ lives, so it's scant, there are no living organisms, basically. And if you eat a lot of Big Macs and Cokes as your diet, basically you have fewer bacteria and fewer kinds of bacteria. A good fiber-filled diet will give you many more bacteria and many more kinds of bacteria, diversity and abundance. And that's really what we want for us to have living in our colon. So here are 2 extremes, right? Here's what most of you don't go near. And here's like Chef AJ's refrigerator here. And we're going to learn about the TMAO that comes from the red meat and short chain fatty acids that come from the fiber. So when you eat animal products, the animal products have in them, the red meat has carnitine, the eggs and poultry have choline. We cannot change these things into something called TMA, but the bacteria can. So the bacteria works on those products, makes TMA, and then we in our livers produce TMAO. For many, many years, we've known that people who have heart attacks and strokes have high levels of TMAO, but we didn't quite know how that all happened. Now we know it's the bacteria that are producing them. So people who eat a lot of red meat have the kinds of bacteria that can produce this TMA. To the other extreme, if we have someone who's totally on a plant-based diet, they get a lot of fiber and they support the bacteria that could turn that fiber into what we call short chain fatty acids. Basically, they clip the fiber into smaller bits, they ferment them, and we end up with these short chain fatty acids that produce all kinds of the vitamins and antibodies and everything else that we were talking about. Now, to be clear, no one's microbiome is totally on one side, totally on the other. We have a mix. But interestingly, if you're on a totally plant-based diet and you have these kind of bacteria that produce the good things, and you're fed one meal of red meat, you actually don't make as much TMAO as a meat eater because you do not have the right bacteria living in your gut. The bacteria can change easily over just a few days if you totally change your diet from one extreme to the other. And so it's very important on a consistent basis to be on a fiber-filled diet so that you're producing the shorty chain fatty acids and you're not producing much of the TMAO. And we know, as we mentioned before, heart attacks and strokes definitely occur more in people who have higher TMAO levels, but also cancers, lung disease, Alzheimer's is more common, and diabetes. And although pneumonia or kidney failure may happen for various reasons, death from those illnesses is associated with higher TMAO levels. So TMAO is really the toxin that does the bad work. So how do we lower our TMAO levels? And you know the answer. We have to feed our microbiome the right things. So basically, we're talking about fiber, which is prebiotic, and fermented foods, which are considered probiotic with living organisms. And for the moment, we're not going to talk about probiotics in a box that you might see on a shelf, but in the pharmacy, but we're going to get to that. So when we're talking about fiber and fermented, the best is a combination of the two, or synbiotic. This is, let's say, sauerkraut, a sauerkraut dish. Sauerkraut has live bacteria if it's in the refrigerator section. If it's been pasteurized so that it could be in a jar on a shelf, it's not, it doesn't have live bacteria anymore. So unpasteurized sauerkraut. The next one here is a miso soup. So miso paste is fermented soy. So if you serve the miso, which is the fermented with the tofu and greens, you have a good combination of pre and probiotics. Next is yogurt, and even dairy-free yogurt does have live cultures in it. So dairy-free yogurt with the nuts and seeds and berries, perfect synbiotic. And then yogurt or kefir, a green smoothie with berries, perfect for feeding your microbiome. So I just looked at, I'm always taking pictures of my food, but it's very easy to get a good diet for your microbiome. So zoodles, zucchini noodles with stir fry, or these are, maybe we'll get to talk later about this Afghan project we're doing, but Afghan soups with, this again is non-dairy yogurt. I've tried a lot of yogurts that don't really work as sour cream or, but Kite Hill Greek style yogurt is nice and thick and really works well for that kind of thing. Tempeh, tempeh is often listed on the list of fermented foods, and it is produced by fermentation, but I just found out that it's actually pasteurized in most cases when you buy it from the store. So it's not really a probiotic, but it's good anyway. And I've learned also that if you steam it for 10 minutes and then marinate it, it really takes up the marinade quite well. This is a fruit sherbet that we'll be making, and power bars that we'll also be making. Frike is this smoky grain that I've come to like, and it's full of leeks, and we'll be talking about leeks in a minute. Chia pudding with fruit, and this is a chickpea salad that I use a dough cutter, chop up the chickpeas, and you could make it like tuna fish, put in lemon and celery and all. So all these things feed your microbiome really well. Again, on this side, the prebiotics, the fiber, all these components, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And then in particular, some of these components are especially good. On the probiotic side, this again is the live bacteria in fermented foods. It's complicated. We don't exactly know that the bacteria we eat gets settled into our microbiome because it's a kind of tight neighborhood down there. And sometimes they get incorporated and sometimes not. And you can change your microbiome quite easily, but it will revert right away. So in other words, if you're a plant-based person, all good foods, right? And then you start eating a little bit of meat, the microbiome will gradually change over to the meat eaters. But on the other hand, someone who is an omnivore who adds in more and more fruits and vegetables eventually will tilt the scale a little bit more to the better bacteria. And that can happen actually within a few days. We talked about the probiotics in foods. And just to be aware that fermented foods can cause a lot of gas and bloating. And so you probably don't want to overdo it on those. So what kind of probiotics should we use? We see them on the pharmacy shelves and everyone knows about them. But if you talk to Cleveland clinics, they say food. The best way to treat your microbiome is by eating the fiber-filled foods that we talked about and fermented ones. As you can see, the three major brands of probiotics have different bacteria in them. So if you're having, let's say, diarrhea and you want to take a probiotic, which one should you take? And the answer is, we have no idea. Should you take a probiotic when you start a course of antibiotics? For right now, jury says no. The infectious disease people, Cleveland clinics, they all say there's no need to start a probiotic. How much of an effect can it have? If you take it with the pill, it's not clear that it has any effect. So not great data on that. And the last part of the biotics is postbiotics. And those are just maybe the cell walls, maybe the short chain fatty acids. And if we could actually give those to people, they might be helpful in terms of making good hormones and antibodies and all, and would be safer than giving people actual bacteria. But this is just a field of research for now. We're not too full of data yet for that. So the other major influences on our personal microbiome, I love the way the fork and knife is like no animal products. So anything with fat and sugar is really not too good for your microbiome. And in terms of sweeteners, the artificial sweeteners are not good as well. They don't get absorbed and they get down to the colon, and they're felt to probably impact the microbiome in a bad way. And stress, we know that there's a big brain-gut connection. The way you feel butterflies in your stomach, or you get, diarrhea with anxiety. So it's very important to approach the stress that you have. And everyone has a different way of doing this. Exercise, and especially yoga, is helpful. mindfulness, meditation, gardening, music, whatever strikes you, but it's just very important to have stress reduction as part of your treatment of a good microbiome. And this is just to stress how this is the wave of research that's been going on, and pre and probiotics have been just escalating in research. And now the postbiotics started a little later, but we should be hearing a lot more as we go along the next few years. So Michael Grieger, very famous vegan advocate, nutritionfacts.org. Vegan poop is the best poop. So why not just take someone's poop who's been eating all this vegan stuff and, transpose it into someone else and make them healthy? Well, it turns out that that actually is being done for one particular illness. You might have heard of C. diff, diarrhea, or colitis. It happens often not often, but sometimes after antibiotic courses and in hospital, and now it's more in the community. So if someone has had that kind of colitis several times over, it keeps recurring, we actually do what's called fecal microbiome transplant. And it could be done in pill form, so it's not necessarily a terrible situation. But many other diseases have been linked to the microbiome. And we say linked because we're not sure which direction it goes. Is it that the abnormal microbiome causes the disease, or does the disease change the microbiome? And so things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, colon cancer, your obesity or malnutrition, they've done experiments where so there was this trial where children from India who were malnourished were refed, and all the kids were refed with the same formula, but some gained weight and some did not. So why did some not gain weight given this formula? And by transposing their microbiome into mice, they found that it was the microbiome. They didn't have the right bacteria to process the calories, to gain the weight and do what they needed to do with it. So the microbiome is really in charge of what goes on. Microbiome is also associated with allergies, asthma, skin infections, how we process medications, anxiety and depression, and heart disease, as we've mentioned, diabetes. Very interesting. They found that some bacteria can actually produce the chemical that we've started giving to people as a treatment for diabetes and obesity at this point. So, in theory, at least, if we could promote those bacteria, we can treat diabetes internally. And aging is an important one as well. There's a term now called inflammaging, in that so many of the diseases of old age, dementia, bad arthritis, are part of an inflammatory process. And if you look at older people, they might have trouble eating, and they're not eating the same good, hearty, fibrous foods that they once did, or they may have GI problems, so they're cutting back and eating a much blander diet. And so they're trying to connect, can we affect the aging process and the inflammation that's associated with it by figuring out how we could continue to keep a healthy microbiome in them for longer. And what's a talk without COVID? So COVID works two ways. The microbiome affects COVID, and COVID affects the microbiome. So no doubt the sanitizers have affected our microbiome on our hands, on our countertops, et cetera. But we still have, some interpersonal connections, and more so now, fortunately. So we still have some exposure to bacteria, but the food rules don't change, so that you could keep supplying your colon's microbiome. But what about the other way around? If we have a good microbiome, does that affect how we respond when we get a COVID infection? And we're just starting to get the data in now, but it looks like vegans may actually do better with COVID. And the thought is that The antibodies are good and there's less inflammation. And we know that one of the worst things that happens in COVID is a real cytokine flare, loads of inflammation. And so if we have just the right balance of antibodies and inflammation, maybe things work out better. So again, we'll have more information in the future, but it's a possibility. So going back to lifestyle medicine, which is something I became boarded in during COVID, the principles of it include everything that we know is important to good health, healthful eating to start with, of course, and physical activity, stress management that we've mentioned, personal relations probably help our microbiome as you hand back cards and mahjong tiles and hug and whatever. Sleep, of course, is important, and trying to avoid nicotine and an abundance of alcohol. So that's really what I wanted to tell you. Basically, that the vast, vast majority of genes in our body do not belong to us. They belong to our microbiome. It's a very complex system. We don't want to wipe it out. So things like colon cleanses, I'm sure, at this point, you might understand why that would not be a good idea. The bacteria are responsible for all these different functions, for how we process calories, how we fight infections, how much inflammation there is on a daily basis, allergies and moods. So indirectly, we absolutely affect the microbiome. You are what you eat, truly. The whole produce section at your supermarket is the best medicine. And as a caveat, we don't know more than we know. So we have to say that we are understanding way more than we did 10 years ago, but we know that there's still a lot more to learn. And for the time being, just be kind to your microbiome so it can be kind to you. This book, The Good Gut, was written in 2015, but I just reviewed it recently, and it really, even though 2015 is like light years away from us in terms of this research, the book is still very good and really covers a lot of what we talked about. Cleveland Clinic Sites is good. Michael Grieger is excellent and entertaining, and takes no commercial money, which is very good because his facts are facts. And Nutrition Action as well. CSPI also takes no commercial money. The Nutrition Action newsletter is just a 16-page pamphlet that comes out every month. I'd really encourage you to subscribe to that if it interests you. And this is my website, Lady Doc's Corner Cafe. And there are actually some 3 posts on the microbiome. So if you wanted kind of a review of what we talked about today, it's on there. And that's it.
Wow. That is amazing. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm going to watch it again. But my favorite line that you said, probably my favorite line that's ever been said in all 736 episodes of Chef AJ Live, is vegan poop is the best poop.
It comes through. And it's amazing how much influence those guys have over what happens in our bodies.
I'm going to quote you on that. And so is there a list I know that when they do those fecal transplants, is there a place we can donate?
Oh, that I don't know, but I could find that out for you. I will look into that.
That is great. Well, you should be presenting at the PCRM and other conferences.
Oh, thank you. That's a great compliment. Thank you.
You should tell Dr. That's very, very wonderful. And it's a topic I'm very interested in. It's interesting because I didn't know that about fermented foods, that once they're,
pasteurized.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people know that, because I think they just think that as long as it's fermented and it's in the grocery store, it's going to have benefit.
Yeah. I thought I was doing great with my tempeh, but
It's interesting because on the show Saturday, we're going to be having a chef that's going to actually teach us how to make it ourselves. So that would probably be really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kimchi, she's going to make it without salt and she's going to teach us. So I bet a homemade one would be perfect.
Yeah, that would be great. And even pickles, I think I read about this, that pickles, if they're fermented with only sugar and vinegar, then they are probiotic. But if they're done a different way, it's not. So it gets very technical.
Yeah. And I just, I wish more meat eaters would learn some of this stuff there's so many reasons not to eat meat, just for one, because we're killing the planet and also killing, sentient beings. And I think they just don't know this information.
Yeah. Fortunately, nutrition is coming into the medical education just a little bit. I mean, much more than it was 40 years ago. But it's taking time. And, I think some of the fads interfere with good information, and maybe it seems more complicated than it is. I don't think it's really that complicated if we learn about the real basics. That hasn't changed that much.
It seems to me, because I've had a long history of volunteering at hospitals doing something called pet therapy. And it seems to me that hospitals care more about their ratings than patients' health, because I've actually worked in hospitals to try to improve. I've been hired to help improve the food that they give patients in the cafeteria. But because I guess they have these surveys for patient satisfaction, if they don't serve them what they want, they get a bad rating, which has nothing to do with the actual care in the hospital. I wish they could all just get on board and just say, look, no more. We're not going to serve unhealthy food in our cafeteria or to the patients.
That would be great if they would do it.
Yeah, they're not going to. But I mean, many hospitals still have McDonald's in the lobby. So
yes. Yeah.
It's just so backwards, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you would think, because every doctor, when they graduate, both my brothers are physicians, and I went to their medical school graduations, and they do take that oath. I swear by Apollo the physician. He said, "Let food be thy medicine." I mean, this is not a new concept, people.
Right. Right. But lifestyle changes is quite difficult, and so not only do we need to know about the food aspect, but also about the psychology of change, behavior change, which, your listeners are right on board with that. You don't have to worry, but it's very hard when you're working with people who are not aware and aren't so interested in changing. So it's a process.
Well, I agree with you that it is hard to change people, and a lot of people even know the information, have trouble changing. My problem is that a lot of people don't know the information, and particularly a lot of doctors, because they don't really teach nutrition in medical school.
Yeah. Yeah. They have not. The good news is that lifestyle medicine actually has fellowships going on now in a few dozen schools, and hopefully, it'll gain traction and it'll be better in the future.
Well, so yeah, I mean, you seem, you're like a triple threat. I mean, you're a doctor, you do PowerPoints, and you actually make food. I mean, is there anything that Dr. Seidleman cannot do?
Yeah, no, but it's fun. It's fun. And I'm not on social media much. My husband says, you take so many pictures of your food, you should just be on Instagram. And maybe someday I'll learn that. I don't know.
Well, there's people that can help you. So yeah, I think that'd be fabulous to see the foods that you eat and make and recommend to your patients.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to do questions or if we should.
Yeah. If there's questions in the chat, I'll ask them. But if you want to show the recipes, that'd be amazing. And you guys, Dr. Seidleman's been so generous. They're in the show notes right below this video right now. At least if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, you can't see nothing. So hop on over to YouTube if you're watching on Facebook, if you want to see the recipes.
I'm just gonna.
Are you, I mean, obviously you look very good, and I'm curious if you are a big fitness buff as well.
I'm sorry.
Fitness, like exercise, like.
Yes. So I've always liked exercising. I don't do anything, any one thing in particular, but just loads of walking, boot camp, spin, and whatever. And now pickleball, which
Oh
is
my
like
God,
fun.
I had to retire from it due to a torn rotator cuff, but pickleball is the funnest game in the world.
It's very social. You're not as far away as in tennis, and you could just laugh at everything that happens. It's great. It's great.
Best.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. Okay, so now I'm going to tilt. Let's see. Do I have my?
Oh, okay, I did. A question just came in on pulmonary fibrosis. Can it be reduced or reversed with a whole food plant-based diet?
Oh, that's a tough one because pulmonary fibrosis covers a really wide range of things. It usually refers to what we call idiopathic interstitial fibrosis, but if it's truly fibrosed, that is scarred, and I'm not sure that anything could be reversed per se. However, whatever we can prevent from getting worse, anything that causes less inflammation is better. So I would tend to say, I haven't seen anything about this, but I would tend to say that it would probably help to not make it worse. It would help to slow the progression, but I don't have any absolute data on that.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is a very simple recipe, and literally once you have the ingredients in front of you, 2 seconds. So we're going to start with some dates, and I'm wondering if I could mute myself just while I
think Zoom will do it for you. It has been doing that lately.
Oh, really? If
it's been Zoom, it's been muting the sound. At least it did, or on the earlier podcast. I did.
So first, we're just going to chop up. And I just get it to. I'll show you what.
Yeah, and it did mute it if you want.
It's in pieces now. And then we just add in all the nuts and seeds. So I have almonds, and any almonds I've had sliced, slivered, whole. These are the sunflower seeds. And the recipe has cooked quinoa, which is moisture, but the greatest trick is that I found that dry oatmeal can do the trick. And that way you don't have to even cook your grains. This is chia seeds and hemp seeds. And then we're going to just mix it up again. It's going to go into a dry mix. And now it's sort of like a gravel, something between sand and gravel. I don't know if it's really obvious here, but it's sandy, but not totally broken up, little pieces of nuts and things. And then we're going to add peanut butter. It really doesn't matter if it's smooth or crunchy. My preference is the crunchy kind, but it doesn't
absolutely matter. If you're going to have it, you may as well have the crunchy.
And then the sweetener I've been playing with today, I just have plain maple syrup, but you could use a combination, 4 tablespoons of maple syrup, maybe some molasses or date syrup. The molasses I thought I didn't like, but then it grew on me. So I actually did really like the combination of 1 tablespoon of molasses and 3 of maple syrup. And I think we're good. So now it's a squeezable, it's moist and all mixed together. And then just tell me if you can't see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I have a dish about, must be about 6 by 9 or so. And I just put some parchment because it's easier to deal with that way. And this is basically a lump of doughy stuff. And we're just gonna here. Some of this is a little drier than usual. Okay.
Just saw a question come in from Lynn.
Uh-huh.
While meat eating changes the microbiome negatively, I guess they're assuming it's red meat. Do chicken and fish do the same?
Yeah, those are good questions. So chicken and fish do provide the choline on that bad side, but there's gradation. So if we think of from good to bad, let's say fish, and then white meat chicken, red meat chicken, and then pork. And did I say red meat chicken? I meant dark meat chicken. White meat, dark meat chicken, pork, and then veal and lamb. And then red meat is at the, at the other end of the spectrum.
Kathy says, do you think she could do this recipe in a Vitamix?
I don't know, because I've had some trouble with solid things without liquid in the Vitamix. I don't know what your experience is. I only got a Vitamix at the last maybe 2 or 3 months ago, so I haven't had complete experience with it.
I find that Vitamixes work better when recipes have a little bit of liquid in them.
Yeah. So I'm just flattening this out to fill the glass container. But if you have a larger container, you have a casserole instead of this, it's fine because this is solid enough to keep its own shape. So even if you just fill half the container, it's fine. And let's see. I can't really tell, there's too much reflection from the sun in here, but it's basically a pan full of stuff. You could put it in the freezer the way it is, or you could cut it. I'm just going to show you. I just wanted to show you the different textures. So this one is one that I made with molasses, and I put it in the fridge to show you that if you have it in the fridge, the texture is fine. Let me just go like that. So it easily, it's soft and it breaks easily. It's not hard, but even if you put it in the freezer, which is where I like to keep them because they get a little bit harder, but still they're breakable. It's not like that hard, crunchy stuff, but they're chewy. They have substance. You could carry them around in your pouch. They don't fall apart. So they're really good. I do need to admit that when I did the calorie count, the squares come out to about 100 calories. So they're not low calorie. And I noticed that on the package of dates, it always says this is not a low calorie food. So anything that you put dates into is going to be a little higher calorie, but good nutritious stuff.
Great. Here's another question. Lori says, how long does it take to rebuild the microbiome after antibiotic use?
Yeah. So the statement that I've seen is that you may not build it back 100%, but you can mostly build it back. And I would guess it's in the range of weeks, because even within a few days, you start building it back. And so it takes a while. And the antibiotics don't necessarily wipe out the whole microbiome, because it's only what's sensitive to that antibiotic. So, it builds back gradually, but you're better off with food rather than probiotics on the shelf to build it back.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to move this out of the way. And I have to say this sherbet recipe, I haven't had 100% luck, so we're just going to have to hope that it works today. Here's my new Vitamix. And I'm going to get my frozen mango for bacteria in the lungs. We have, for the last 4 decades that I've been, and I'm going to get my
I don't know if you are interested, but my friend who's a PCRM cooking instructor has a meetup group. I don't know if it's too far from you in Columbia. She'd love for you to come sometime.
Oh, that would be so fun. I just love food.
Maybe even speak at it. You're such a great speaker.
Oh, wow. That would be great. I love it. I love it. So I'm going to put in my liquid first. So I'm not making the full recipe. I'll make a cup of milk. So I'll cut everything to 2/3. My other background is in math, so I tend to just change up recipes as I feel. I have almost a teaspoon of vanilla. And I have 3 dates to go in this because I'm not doing the whole recipe. I also made one sherbet that had cherries, dried cherries in them, and I left them so that they were in pieces, and that was really nice. And then I'm going to put in these mango chunks. And if we're lucky, it's going to work just perfectly. Okay. Get my tool. I love my Vitamix, but I especially love this tool that goes right in.
Oh yeah, the tamper.
Yeah, and it's evidently not long enough to get damaged, so you could just go to town with it.
Angela said the exact same thing I said the minute I met you. The doctor's hair is really cool.
Thank you. That looked like I was working hard here. Okay. There we go. So let's see. I have a dish here. We're just going to scoop it out. And we have like ice cream here. It's amazing. And I think it's best if you have it right out of the Vitamix. So it's kind of cool if you have people over, you just want to make a dessert as they're standing there. Once you freeze it, it really turns into like Italian ice, you know, the kind that you really have to scrape. But if you leave it in the fridge for about 2 hours, it softens just to the right extent. So you could fool with that. I've also thrown it into the microwave for just 10 or 15, no, for probably about 30 seconds, it turned out. And it melts it, but it's uneven. So I think defrosting it in the fridge works best if you're going to do that. Boy, we've gotten some real afternoon sun here.
Nice.
I can barely see it.
That's amazing. It looks delicious here. I just saw a question from Elizabeth. And it's once the colon lining has some damage or ulceration, what does work best to produce more microbiome to heal than a plant-based diet?
Yeah, we don't, we should get some super glue or something, but really there's nothing that I know of other than a good diet. And For someone who's not used to a totally plant-based diet, as you know, you have to go really gradually, or else it doesn't work out well. Just a lot of irritation and diarrhea.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
we all learned today that vegan poop is the
Yes.
that needs to be a t-shirt, actually, now that I think of it.
I wouldn't doubt if Dr. Grieger has that as a t-shirt.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, you're just a treasure. What a find, so thank you. Gosh, you can do everything. PowerPoint, cook, talk. Hey, pickleball.
It's been such a pleasure. This is so much fun. You're such a good interviewer.
Well, no, I try to pay, I try to, I try to be, but thank you. I appreciate you saying that. So please consider doing Instagram, because I think people love seeing what people eat for some reason, especially their doctor, I think.
Yeah. And I'd love to contact your friend in Colombia. That would be so fun.
Yeah. Hopefully she's watching, because she must be, because she asked me to do that. Actually, I can introduce you on email if you like. She's lovely. I think you'd really like her.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some wonderful plant-based doctors in Maryland. There's Dr. Dana Simpler. There's others. There's the sleep Dr. David Neubauer at Johns Hopkins, the sleep doctor. So there's quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Good. More power.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Seidleman. This was a wonderful presentation on so many levels. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. It's been nice talking to you.
It was fun. And thank you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. The show tomorrow is at 2 p.m. Pacific time instead of 11 a.m. And my guest is Dr. Amanda McKinney and Dr. Stott Skoll. I don't know if you know, Dr. Seidelman, there's a new documentary. It's free to watch called Plantwise. And these are some of the doctors that are in the film.
Oh, okay. I heard Scott Stoll at he's Plantrition Project, right?
Yeah. And Dr. Barnard's in the film. And so we're just going to talk about the film tomorrow. So yes, it's nice. It's like less than an hour long. So Dr. George Guthrie, I think, is one of the doctors in it. I'll send you that link, because you can watch it for free and maybe share it with your patients. All right. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.